Hello again to another Agakala Reactions. Today we'll be watching Baghdad Burns Fall of the Abbasids. And this is the second part of Abbasids history. I was recommended to watch and react to a video that I posted last week. It was the rise of the Abbasids. So and it's from Epic History. So let's just jump into it and see what was the main reasons of the fall of Abbasids.
In the 8th century Middle East, a new dynasty seized control of one of the world's greatest empires, the Islamic Caliphate. Though little remembered in the West today, the Abbasids reigned for 5 centuries.
It's probably like a reminder what
they oversaw an era of Islamic military dominance, city building, brilliant scholarship, and technological innovation. It has come to be remembered as Islam's golden age. This is the story of the Abbasid Caliphate. It's great to welcome back as video sponsors Raid Shadow Legends, the hugely successful fantasy tactical battle game for mobile. Raid's latest and most fearsome opponent is the 6-headed Hydra clan boss, each head with its own vicious traits. The Head of Decay turns your own healing powers against you, weakening squad members even as you heal them, and casting powerful protective shields around other Hydra heads. The Head of Wrath must be taken down with swift, brutal economy of force, because once you've hit it 15 times, it triples its attack power to strike back with devastating force. You can also take part in a new clan-based competition, Hydra Clash, in which you and 4 other clans compete to inflict the most punishment on the Hydra, with lucrative rewards on offer. It's the stunning visuals and countless tactical choices that we enjoy most about this game, and we're sure you'll love it too. If you're not playing Raid already, use the link in the video description or scan our QR code to get started with Epic Champion Drake and other great bonuses. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. The Abbasid Caliphate had flourished under the reign of Caliph Harun al-Rashid. And to ensure its continued success, he arranged his succession in a way that he believed would ensure stability and peace. His son, Muhammad, was to be his heir, but in a move common since the time of the Umayyads, he also named another son, Abdullah, as Muhammad's heir. It proved a recipe for disaster. In 809, in Baghdad, Muhammad succeeded his father as caliph, taking the title Al-Amin, the Trustworthy. His half-brother, Abdullah, became governor of Khorasan with the title Al-Ma'mun, the Trusted One. Rival factions soon formed at both courts. In Baghdad, Al-Amin's advisors urged him to remove his brother from the succession. And just a year into his reign, he tore up his father's arrangement.
Bad move, I guess.
Al-Ma'mun was furious. Fraternal distrust exploded into civil war. Al-Ma'mun's Khorasani forces won a great victory against a much larger force at Ray, and marched on to besiege Baghdad in 812. After a bloody year-long siege, the city fell. Caliph Al-Amin was captured as he tried to flee, and executed. Initially, Al-Ma'mun ruled the caliphate from his old base at Merv. Here, in an effort to widen his support after the civil war, he fostered a new alliance with the Alids. This powerful family was descended from Ali, 4th Caliph and son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. They'd later become leaders of Shia Islam, the branch of Islam that believes true spiritual authority belongs to Ali's descendants. Instead of traditional Abbasid black, Al-Mamun's court began to wear green, a colour associated with the Alids.
It's kind of like in was it House of the Dragon, blacks and greens. I wonder if George R. R. Martin took inspiration for that from here, because it's just so far it's about they were just using it being basically fighting over who's gonna take over the power, just like in that. I wonder if that the House of the Dragon is inspired by the history of Abbasids.
Al-Mamun
So far, it
even
sounds very
married two
similar.
of his daughters into the Alid family and made Alid Imam Ali al-Rida his heir apparent. But these policies sparked hostility back in Iraq and led to major revolts in Baghdad. After 6 years, the Caliph moved the capital back there to restore order and abandoned his Alid alliance. Al-Mamun is also remembered for his attempts to impose a new religious doctrine on the Caliphate. He first invited distinguished scholars to Baghdad to discuss theological issues, such as the deeds of the companions of the Prophet, the Hadiths, and the nature of the Quran. However, his pronouncement that the Quran was at some point created by God, rather than co-eternal with God, encountered bitter resistance. 18 years of religious persecution followed, a period known as the Minha, or Inquisition, which saw dissenting scholars imprisoned or even executed. In 833, Al-Mamun was succeeded by his brother, who took the title Al-Mutasim. He'd prove far less interested in theological debate than the clash of arms. The armies of the Abbasid Caliphate, renowned in battle, were drawn from both Arab and non-Arab subjects. The Khorasanis, soldiers of the frontier province of Khorasan, were the troops who'd helped propel the Abbasids to power during the Third Fitna, or Islamic Civil War. Drawing on Persian and steppe warrior traditions, their ranks included both armoured infantry and heavy armoured cavalry, similar to European knights. The descendants of Khorasani...
Was the Knights already on that time? I thought Knights were later on. We're talking about 900 something, so more like they should be saying the Knights were similar, like inspired by the Khorasani warriors, I guess.
Who settled near Baghdad were known as Abna al-Khorasan, sons of the people of Khorasan. Famed as elite and versatile infantrymen, they formed the loyal core of the Caliph's army. Other notable contingents included the Dailamis, expert skirmishers from the highlands of northern Persia. While African troops, including military slaves and Muslim converts from Ethiopia, fought as heavy infantry, armed with shield, sword, and spear. The great Caliph Harun al-Rashid was known to have an elite bodyguard of 40 African soldiers. Abbasid armies were particularly skilled in siege warfare and made expert use of catapults, mangonels, and battering rams.
What's a mangonel?
They even had specialist troops armed with naphtha, or petroleum-based fire weapons. No contemporary illustrations are known, but they're thought to have been similar to this slightly later Byzantine illustration. The 9th century, however, would see changes so radical that some historians have termed it a military revolution. During the civil war between al-Rashid's sons, al-Mu'tasim had begun to expand his military retinue by purchasing Turkish slave soldiers. His favorite supplier was the Samanid family, governors of Transoxiana.
800, not 900, so...
These slave soldiers were seized from their villages as boys, or bought in slave markets, then sent for intensive military training alongside an Islamic education. They emerged as formidable cavalrymen and superbly skilled mounted archers. Al-Jahith, a contemporary, wrote of them with awe. The Turks are as good as others with the lance, and in addition, if 1,000 of their horsemen are hard-pressed, they will loose all their arrows in a single volley and bring down 1,000 enemy horsemen. No body of men can stand up to such a test. Historians dispute the exact timeline, but at some point in the 9th century, these Turkish slave soldiers, known as Mamluks, had come to form an elite corps within the Abbasid army, one that was personally loyal to the Caliph and could be used to intimidate his political rivals. Turkish officers, despite their initial outsider status and ignorance of Arabic language and customs, began to wield huge influence at the Caliph's court. This offended the old nobility, many of whom also stopped receiving traditional diwan payments for their military service.
So basically, it's all gonna be about power and money, isn't it? The money always power, like fuel the fight over the power. It's always the same thing.
Discontent even pushed some soldiers to riot in the streets of Baghdad. To ease tension, al-Mu'tasim constructed a new city for the Turkish military elite, Samarra. This was where he garrisoned the Turks and rewarded their commanders with land.
That's big.
And it's where, in 848, work began on the world's largest mosque and its famous spiral minaret.
Wow.
Al-Mu'tasim's reliance on slave soldiers to shore up his power had destroyed centuries of military tradition.
That held up really well.
And it had sown the seeds.
More than 1,000, what, 1,200 years? Damn.
2 years later, the Caliph led his formidable new army against the old foe, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. The campaign ended in a great victory, the capture and sack of Amorium. O day of the Battle of Amorium, our hopes have returned from you, overflowing with honey-sweet milk, wrote Arab poet Abu Tamam. But even such victories failed to ease the tension between Turkish officers and Abbasid nobles. Some nobles even plotted to overthrow al-Mu'tasim and expel the Turks. But their conspiracy was discovered, and they were executed.
Yep, that's what usually happens.
Al-Mu'tasim was succeeded by his eldest son, Al-Wathiq. Following his unexpected death, a second son, Al-Mutawakkil, took the throne, backed by the Turk generals. They'd hoped for a pliable puppet, but instead, Al-Mutawakkil decided it was time to reassert caliphal authority. On his orders, several Turkish leaders were assassinated, and he tried to use Arab and Armenian troops to counterbalance their influence. But the Turks struck back. In 861, the Caliph was assassinated by his own bodyguards. The chaos and civil war that followed is known as the Decade of Anarchy. 4 caliphs took power, all puppets of the Turkish military elite. Each, in turn, was violently overthrown. Order was only restored with the accession of Caliph al-Mu'tamid in 870. But the anarchy had irreparably damaged the Caliph's authority. Even before the Abbasids came to power, the vast caliphate had struggled to maintain control of its many regions.
Well, that's not surprising. It's pretty much that's what happens with every empire, isn't it? It's getting too big to be able to control all of it. Because especially back then, before the, like the phones and even telegraphs in the 19th century and stuff like that, everything was basically have to be hand delivered, all of the orders and stuff like that. So obviously that was not easy and usually massive. That's what I think anyway. I might be just mumbling now, rambling.
Authority west of Egypt had long been largely theoretical. But now, multiple major uprisings broke out as local governors and warlords staked out their own claims to rule. Egypt, fertile and prosperous, was an early casualty, lost to a rebel Turkish commander who founded his own Tulunid dynasty. In southern Iraq, a major revolt broke out among agricultural slaves from Eastern Africa, known as Zanj. The 14-year uprising devastated the region and severely disrupted Abbasid tax income and Baghdad's food supply. In Afghanistan, a coppersmith named Yaqub al-Safar made an astonishing rise to power, founding his own Safarid dynasty and conquering much of eastern Persia.
Oh.
His advance was only halted at the Battle of Deir al-Akul in 876. In such turbulent times, Abbasid caliphs struggled to impose their authority. But there were some successes.
Okay, guys.
Okay, there's an ad. So, like I was saying, there's obviously there's always a problem with things like that because when there's a big, what I was trying to say before, when there's a big, massive caliphate in this case, where it spans over thousands of kilometers, because look at the size of it. It took like up to the north, like where the Pakistan is now, isn't it? And now down to the where Egyptian passed west as well. So that was big, and try to keep that in control when you don't have a quick way of sending out your orders and stuff. So yeah, it's never easy to keep something like that in order and under control back in the day, I guess. I might be obviously mistaken, but I think there was no quick way of being in touch with all of your subjects. Okay, we're back.
Caliph al-Mu'tadid engineered a brief Abbasid resurgence, thanks to military campaigning and shrewd diplomacy, notably his marriage to the daughter of the Tulunid ruler of Egypt. She was the celebrated Qutr al-Nada. Her name means dewdrop. One scholar described her as one of the most intelligent and regal women who ever lived. When al-Mu'tadid told his bride, "You've done well for yourself by marrying the Caliph. What more could you thank God for?" She replied, "You've done well for yourself. This makes my father your subject. What more could you thank God for?" Her bold response was a sign of her character, as well as the delicate new balance of power between Abbasid caliphs and some of their more powerful subjects. during the reign of al-Mu'tadid's son, al-Muqtafi, Tulunid Egypt was fully reabsorbed into the Abbasid Caliphate. But elsewhere, the news was dire. Abbasid authority collapsed in Arabia, where one Shiite group, the Qarmatians, even began attacking pilgrims on their way to Holy Mecca.
Wow.
In 930, they stole the Black Stone, the Holy of Holies, from the Kaaba, a terrible blow to Abbasid prestige. In Central Asia, the Persian Samanids carved out their own empire and declared independence. This was the height of the so-called Persian Intermezzo, when native Persian dynasties ruled in Persia once more. Increasingly, the Abbasid Caliph was said to reign, but not rule. He'd become a symbol without power, often under the thumb of his vizier. By the 930s, the Caliph had lost control of both the civilian administration and army command, which was handed over to a new official, the Amir al-Umara, commander of the commanders. The final humiliation came in 945. The Buyids were Shiite warlords from the Dailam Mountains of northwestern Persia, but their first success was in Fars, before they went on to seize control of Persia and Iraq. Their triumphal entry into Baghdad was a deep humiliation for the Sunni Abbasids. Yet they retained the title of Caliph, as no more than figureheads under Buyid command, and spectators to these turbulent times. 2 decades later, another Shiite dynasty, the Fatimids, swept along the North African coast, conquered Egypt, and founded Cairo as the capital of their own caliphate.
Interesting.
Some historians label this the Shiite century, with Shiite dynasties ruling twin caliphates and dominating much of the Muslim world. But it was not to last. A dangerous new Sunni power was poised to burst out of Central Asia: the Seljuk Turks.
That was a quick out again. So I'm kind of looking at the map and the Turks, and it, like, obviously now there's Turkey and it's more like northwest from where Baghdad is, and in this case it's all like east, almost by the China, today's China, I'm guessing. So it's kind of interesting how everything moved within the history, like 1,000 years, and look how much different it is. Turks were back then, there, and now they're more on closer to Europe. So just learning new things every day. Google Pixel 8a. Okay, we're almost done. And let's go again.
The Seljuk
See, this
Turks
is what I mean, like,
were pastoral.
I'm gonna back here. And so this is where the Turkey is today, and this is where the Turks coming from. So I mean, it's actually not that far. I guess it's just kind of like moved westward to the Caspian Sea, but still, it's kind of interesting how that changes, isn't it? Because honestly, I shouldn't be that surprised, because Poland kind of changed the way how far east, how far west we are as well. So like over the history. So
The Seljuk Turks were pastoralists, nomadic livestock farmers from the Central Asian steppe. They were fierce warriors, who became champions of Sunni Islam. At the end of the 10th century, possibly in response to climate change, they swept south into Khorasan. The Ghaznavid Empire, successor to the Samanids, was first to fall. The Seljuk Turks were unstoppable, surging westwards across the Persian plateau, taking Baghdad and toppling the Buyids, crushing a Byzantine army at Manzikert, and forging the great Seljuk Empire. Their triumph was tempered by the arrival of European crusaders, who took Jerusalem in 1099 and carved out a series of crusader states. One Shia sect, shrouded in legend, struck back at the Seljuks with deadly precision. In 1092, Nizam al-Mulk, vizier of the Seljuk Empire, was killed by the Order of Assassins, its hit squad disguised as Sufi mystics. The Assassins, or Hashashin as they're known in Arabic, were a new Ismaili military order formed in the mountains of northwestern Persia. Facing powerful enemies, but without an army of their own, they turned to subterfuge and assassination to achieve their goals. Many fanciful stories are told about the Assassins, but the order was real and feared, and responsible for scores of political murders over the next 2 centuries. Under the Seljuks, Abbasid caliphs continued to reign as spiritual leaders and figureheads. But the 12th century saw the fracturing of the great Seljuk Empire, a familiar story of disputed successions and local governors making their bid for power. Sensing weakness, in 1136, Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtafi raised his own army to reassert Abbasid independence for the first time in nearly 2 centuries. He took control of Baghdad, and in 1157 held it against a Seljuk siege. After generations of foreign subjugation, the Abbasids had re-emerged as an independent power. But it would soon all come crashing down.
Are they too weak for this time to be able to actually keep the power for longer? Like they were, obviously there were all other things around them, more powerful countries as well, so I wonder if that was the reason. We'll see in a second then, whenever the ads finish. So far it's really interesting. It's like, it's a history. History is interesting, but you just have to, there's so much that you can learn from about history, and I always think that you should really learn some basic history to just not repeat the mistakes of the past. Because honestly, it's just a lot of what's happening that basically it's just happening. It happened before, like you can see here.
In the 13th century, a new force from the east tore
Mongols.
through the Islamic world, scattering armies and destroying every city that did not submit to them. The Mongols. First to fall, the Khwarezmian Empire, successor to the Seljuks, overrun by the Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan. By 1256, his grandson, Hulagu, was poised to renew the onslaught. But first, he turned his attention to the Assassins, rumored to be plotting his death. The order was scattered and crushed. 2 years later, Hulagu advanced against the Abbasid Caliphate. As his armies neared Baghdad, he sent a stern warning to Caliph al-Mustasim, demanding the city's surrender. Despite the Mongols' terrifying record of destroying any city that opposed them, al-Mustasim decided Baghdad's walls could keep out any steppe nomads.
Did they though?
He was wrong.
No, okay, so they didn't.
After half Baghdad's garrison was massacred in a disastrous sortie, the city surrendered. But Hulagu was in no mood for mercy. A contemporary chronicler described the horrors that followed. The people of Baghdad were put to the sword and subjected to 40 days of killing, pillaging, and enslavement. They tortured people to extort their wealth. They killed men, women, and children. A great part of the city, including the Caliph's mosque, was burnt, and the city laid in ruins. The dead lay like mounds in the streets and markets. The death toll is unknown, but was in the many thousands. Allegedly, only Christians were spared, thanks to the intercession of Hulagu's Christian wife. Baghdad's libraries were destroyed, their books and manuscripts, representing centuries of Muslim scholarship, were thrown into the Tigris River,
the history that
so
was
that
just
it was
like
said
with
to
the
run black
fire
with
of
ink.
the Alexander's library. We lost so much
Al-Mustasim
knowledge.
was forced to witness this terrible
Same
destruction. Then, according to several sources, he was rolled in a carpet and trampled to death, as Mongols feared to spill royal blood. The last Caliph of Baghdad was dead. Never again would the Abbasids hold meaningful political power. Al-Mustasim was not the last Abbasid Caliph. The line would continue under the Mamluk Sultanate that now ruled Egypt, but his successors in Cairo were merely ceremonial figures, religious leaders with little power. The last Caliph, Al-Mutawakkil III, surrendered to the Ottoman Empire in 1517 and was taken away as a prisoner to Constantinople. It was a humiliating fate for a dynasty that had once ruled one of history's greatest empires, one that had dominated the Middle East, that had taken on and defeated the Byzantines in the west and Chinese in the east, that had overseen a great flourishing of scholarship, culture, technology, and trade, and reigned over the era that is remembered as Islam's golden age. For centuries to come, Islamic leaders would assert their legitimacy by claiming descent from this one towering dynasty, the Abbasids.
Well, that was interesting.
Thanks.
Kind of sad that they fell, I guess. They were quite open-minded, but that's what happens in history with the big, massive rulers. Not massive rulers, but I'm just saying about ruling the massive spaces and stuff. History just don't hold. You're not going to hold the power unless you... actually, I don't know how. I don't think there is a history that would kind of... I don't know what I'm trying to say. Thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye!